We'll call this meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners to order. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. And I don't see that Pastor Lemay is here. Lemmy is here, so we'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Ingalls. Your floor, sir.
Roger that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll move on to public comment. At this time, public comment will be taken on those items. At this time, the public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Board of County Commissioners. Public comment cards and comments left on the county's website prior to the board meeting have been compiled and made a part of the supporting materials that have been provided to the county commissioners and public for review. Only 2 periods of public comment will be taken during this meeting, one at the beginning of the board meeting and again at the end of the meeting. Public comment will not be taken on each agenda item. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person who has left a voice message on the Douglas County Public Comment phone line 775-783-6007. Once a public comment period has been opened, once public comment closes, the voice messages will be played to the public and county commissioners in the order that they were recorded. No more than 1 voice message public comment per person will be played during each public comment period. The board wants to encourage the respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. If the content of any voicemail is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being irreverent, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, or amounts to a personal attack or interfering with the right of others, the voice message will be skipped in the next public comment. Douglas County's public comment phone line became available to take public comment at 1 p.m. The public comment will remain open for at least 5 minutes to allow members of the public to call or until the last caller has finished leaving a voice message on the county's public comment phone line. Please start playing the public comment. Do we have any?
Natalie Wood for the record. Yes, we do. I will start playing them.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeannie Shizuru, SHIZURU, item number 2, I'm opposed. The fiscal year 2020 bill grant application is filled with fraudulent information. First, this agenda item 2 is to approve a bill grant application that was submitted on Monday, May 18th at 11:54 a.m. In other words, the application was submitted without the proper authority of the board, which is supposedly taking place today, and without a proper public hearing. The county does not have $500,000 to spend on Muller Parkway next year. This year's budget, 2019-20, had a budget of $300,000 engineering costs for designing Muller Parkway, and that money came from a one-time windfall. Just because a non-recurring windfall was allowed to be spent on Muller Parkway's 30% design fee in FY 1920 does not mean that that money exists to be budgeted for recurring costs in future years. This is a one-time windfall that is now being characterized as recurring $500,000 budgeted costs per year for Muller Parkway. There is no $500,000, therefore there is no $500,000 budget per year for Muller Parkway. The annual budget commitment of $500,000 that the county purports for Muller Parkway also does not exist. The fiscal year 2021 budget will not be discussed until May 26th and 27th. So how can there be an annual budget commitment? Preliminary discussions on this next year's budget did not include any mention of Muller Parkway. Since $500,000 does not exist here, there is no revenue stream for a $4 million Muller Park bond for phase 2, and no revenue stream for the $3.2 million Muller Park bond for phase 3 that has been mentioned in the bill grant application. A future phase 3 bill grant application of $12.8 million should not be heard or presented to the public, because it would only be allowed to be submitted as a subsequent bill grant application if a bill grant award is awarded for phase 2. Finally, identifying $2 million in today's budget item, augmenting the previously board-approved bill grant application as cost savings of $1.6 million is a joke. It could only save the county $1.6 million if the DOT were actually to award Douglas County $16 million in FY 2020 application. Otherwise, it's just merely increasing the cost of phase 2. The phase 3 bill grant application, excuse me, that's my comment. Thank you, guys.
Okay, next.
Lynn Muzzy, M-U-Z-Z-Y. Last month, I pointed out that the Pencil Walsh Rice Syndicate voted to commit $34.25 million to build an event center for your casino friends with fewer seats and double the price tag originally proposed, before your assessment of the pandemic on Douglas County. A recent letter to the editor cited a recent magazine article titled "Government Splurged on Stadiums and Luxury Hotels Before the Coronavirus." As the writer said, COVID will permanently cause concert promoters, corporate event planners to rethink cramming large groups of people into compact spaces, trashing the event center business model. But in your infinite wisdom, you have relieved the giant casino parent companies of that worry and put that bullseye on Douglas County taxpayers. Today's item 3, an update on the current fiscal status of Douglas County, comes after item 2, your pathetic pursuit of an unlikely federal build grant that will fund a 2-lane gift to the Park family, a multi-intersection construction conduit, a fairy tale bypass. You have again put Douglas County taxpayers at risk by agreeing to build this roadway. But if, or when, you don't get your grant, you'll slap the taxpayers in the face with a $12 million minimum bill for the privilege of having 2 north-south roadways clogged with 10,000 car trips per day when Park is built out. Commissioner Rice's $5,000 campaign contribution in 2018 from the David S. Moore Living Trust was just brought to my attention. Mr. Moore's professional experience includes a stint as George Soros' fund manager. You don't much like having dishonesty ascribed to your syndicate, but when you're so obviously proving that money from your wealthy contributors costs instead of serving Douglas County taxpayers, you indict yourself.
Next.
Ellie Waller, E-L-L-I-E-W-A-L-L-E-R. My regular rant, only allowing 3 minutes per person for several topics is violating my public right to provide comprehensive comments online. First and foremost, the county submitted the bill grant May 18th, the last day of submittal. Item number 2 on today's agenda, requesting an additional $400K for approval to increase the already approved $3.6 million on May 7th as the county's contribution is sloppy and possibly fraudulent, cleaning up what the county has submitted. Transparency builds trust, and this is really murky. With that said, why was there a mistake on May 7th? The bill grant request is stated on page 4 of the application. The engineer's opinion of probable cost to complete the final design and construction of phase 2 of Moeller Parkway is approximately $20 million. Furthermore, on page 5, source and amounts of funds. The source of funding for phase 2 of Moeller Parkway extension is anticipated to come from 2 sources. 2020 bill grant of $16 million, which is 80%, and Douglas County $4 million, which is 20%. The commissioners and citizens of Douglas County were provided supplemental information on May 19th, the day after the bill grant was submitted and 2 short days before this hearing. There are several hundred pages of documentation provided. 349, page 2017 transportation plan, 142-page traffic analysis of key intersections, 72-page sale 2013 Douglas County vision, and of course the 54-page bill grant. As I'm a newcomer, I want to read documents associated to provide meaningful comments. This is a lot of information to consume. There were 9 letters of support, 3 of which stated how much the request was and supported $18 million. One dated April 28th, the other May 13th. But what is important to note is the co-signed by Senators Cortez Masto and Rosen alongside Congressman Amedee requested $16 million on May 1. The addition of the Fantasyland agri-hooks in the bill grant was a bold statement considering that concept for the 2,500 home park development has not come before your board as a project. The late release of the documents surfaced an unapproved increase. What are the legal ramifications of committing $4 million in county dollars when only $3.6 million was approved by the commissioners on May 7th and the bill grant submittal May 18th, today being May 21st? We need a roadmap, an audit trail of funding requests and approval for the entire Moeller Parkway project. Lastly, the county commitment of any bill grants is yet another irresponsible fiscal commitment, much like the $3.5 million ODAT fund. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, next.
COVID-19 has had a devastating effect everywhere, including Douglas County. Governors often estimate 21% of businesses in our county are closed due to the pandemic. The seriously negative effect on our local economy has been evident for over 2 months. County manager issued a COVID-19 financial response directive on March 27th, calling for a hiring freeze and cessation of non-essential purchases, warning of sharp declines in revenues. And 3 weeks after that directive, at the height of the impacts of COVID-19, the board approved $34 million for an event center at the lake. The 3 commissioners who voted for approval, Walsh, Penzel, and Rice, made no mention whatsoever of the devastating effects of the virus on the county's finances, nor did they explain why they thought the county tax increment funding should be utilized at that time, even though the casinos are expecting to benefit most. We're not making any real contribution to funding the event center. The only discussion was about how much the event center might benefit the county. That was dereliction of duty, especially in a time of obvious economic peril. Subsequently, the board discussed how the county should deal with the economic crisis and discussed 5% across the board cuts. This could negatively affect schools, sheriff's office, fire district, parks, libraries, road maintenance, and on and on. We all hope that the economic effects are mitigated as soon as possible, but it's not unrealistic to think that it will take years, not months. It certainly seems like cramming through the commitment for $34 million for the event center was not a prudent thing to do just over a month ago. On item 1, I'm sure you know that there was a stay-at-home order for Lake Tahoe issued on April 3rd, which still includes the order restricting travel to unincorporated portions of the Lake Tahoe Basin, which would include the portion in Douglas County. California has been very hard hit, particularly the metropolitan areas. Just yesterday, California had more than 2,000 new cases, and South Lake Tahoe again urged tourists to refrain from coming to Tahoe. It's a Hard Rock in their letter to you states, "We sense that COVID-19 has increased the need for people to get away from where the virus is most prevalent." Huh? That is the whole reason for stay-at-home orders. We don't want to encourage people from areas where the epidemic is not yet waning to a significant degree to come to our area. That's ridiculous and dangerous. We should follow our governor's recommendations and not seek waivers for specific businesses. Last, on item number 2, let's be honest. Moeller Parkway will be and was planned as a road to facilitate development. While it might have a short-term effect to lessen traffic in the downtown corridor, it is clear when the developments are built out, the traffic will be much worse everywhere on Highway 395, including through the town. Thank you.
Okay, that was the last one received, and it was received at 1:03 p.m.
So we'll wait another 5 minutes. You did say 1:13, right?
No, 1:03 p.m.
Oh, okay. 1:03, then we're in good shape. We can proceed. We'll be looking for approval of the agenda at this point.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the agenda.
All right, we have Commissioner Walsh with a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So Commissioner Rice with a second on the approval of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays?
Nay.
So motion carries 3-2. How about the approval of the previous minutes? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the draft minutes for the April 16, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners.
All right.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh and a second by Commissioner Rice. Is that who I heard?
Yes.
All right. So we move on. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, now we'll move on to the consent calendar. Just prior to the meeting, I was informed that item B, which was going to be pulled, is not going to be pulled. Commissioner Nelson has a request to pull several items. I believe it's K, item O, and P, and U. Is that correct, Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then and those are for discussion, is that correct, Commissioner Nelson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then the DA informed me that item V, Victor, would be pulled. And I believe that's completely off the calendar, is that correct, Mr. Ritchie?
Yes, Chairman, this is Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. That's correct. We request time to modify the resolution.
All right, then changes would be item K, Oscar Papa uniform. Those items would be pulled for discussion, and item Victor be pulled off of the calendar. With those modifications, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent calendar as you just stated.
Second.
Well done. And a second? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, then we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. The motion carries 5-0. All right, so now we'll move on to the administrative calendar. And we'll read the items into the record. We'll start with item K that the Commissioner Nelson would like pulled. I'll read the item into the record. For possible action, discussion to A, approve resolution 2020R-051 and the associated budget augmentations which increase budgeted expenses in the residential construction tax RCT fund. B, approve the use of $80,000 of RCT funds for the Lampe Park Light Project. And C, approve the use of $85,000 of RCT funds for the remetering project at Aspen and Stodic Parks. This would be Mr. Morgan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Board of Commissioners, Scott Morgan, Community Services Director. This specific item is basically moving money from the residential construction tax for parks. And first, I'd like to just talk a little bit about that funding source. This is a mitigation fee that is collected on new home construction in Douglas County in one of 4 districts. We have North County, Central County, South County, and the Tahoe Basin. These money must be spent within 3 years of the time it is collected, or we have to return it back to the payer of the fee. There are some stipulations on that. In some cases, the 3-year clock doesn't begin to tick until 75% of the subdivision has been completed. So these are time-sensitive funds, and I know it seems a little bit unusual to initiate some park projects during the time of crisis, but it is important for us to keep these projects on the books so that we can move forward, spend these money making important enhancements to our parks infrastructure. The first project that we have is to replace all the original lighting in Lampe Park, the old lollipop light poles that we have. We cannot get replacement fixtures any longer. The wiring over the 50 years that has existed is in a state of corrosion. And so what this does is replaces those fixtures with more efficient LED fixtures that have motion sensors in them. There will be an operating savings potentially of this light fixture, and we will have a greater availability of replacement parts throughout Lampe Park. The other project is the remetering project, and we initiated this initially at Lampe Park back when the power company initiated demand charges, and our rates became much more increasingly expensive for the operation of ball field parks. We worked with the Public Utilities Commission to establish our own electric rate for sports field lighting, which is the second lowest rate in the state of Nevada besides irrigation pump electricity. But in order to qualify for that rate, the ball field lights must be on their own meter. Initially, when these ball fields and parks were designed, we have one meter that controls the restrooms, park lighting, parking lot lighting, and the ball field lighting. So we would very much like to separate that so the ball field lights get on their own meter so that we can capture a lower rate. I am available for questions if you have any.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, I just wanted this pulled because I wanted the public to have more information about what you just told us, Scott. And I don't have any problem with this. I understand that we need to spend the money or we're going to lose it. But I just want everybody in the county to understand that we will be watching the budget very, very close for any spending at this point going forward. And that's pretty much why I had the others pulled also, is just to draw attention to the fact that as a board, we do want to keep all expenses down at this point whenever we can. Spent like in this case, or we lose it, then it makes sense to go ahead and do these projects. But for that explanation.
Any other questions?
A question?
Commissioner Ingalls?
Mr. Morgan, so these funds are in the bank right now? Is that my understanding correct?
Scott Morgan, yes, they are cash on account. We have these funds, we have collected them, and they are available to spend for these specific purposes.
Thank you.
Further questions?
None here.
Okay, seeing none then, we'll be looking for a motion.
Okay, I move to approve Resolution 2020R-051 and the associated budget augmentations as presented. The use of $80,000 of RCT funds for the Lampe Park Light Project and the use of $85,000 of RCT funds for the remetering project at Aspen and Stotic Parks.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. Then we can move on to the next item, which is item O. And I'll read that into the record. For possible action, discussion to award $443,007 contract to Sierra Nevada Construction Incorporated for the Lake Village Drive Reconstruction Project as previously budgeted in FY or fiscal year 2019 to 20, and authorize the Public Works Director or County Manager to approve change orders up to 10% of the contract amount. Mr. Nordlow.
Josh Nordlow, Douglas County Public Works, for the record. We put this project out to bid. We received 3 responsive bids for this project. As can be seen in the bid tab, they're kind of spread out pretty well. We like having Sierra Nevada Construction work for us. They come in, they do a good job with minimal change orders. So we feel that they are a good fit for this project. And with that, we believe that this was in the 5-year transportation project plan already. And we'd like to go ahead and move forward and get this project done this year. And with that, I will take any questions you may have.
Questions? Commissioner
Once
Nelson.
again, I really don't have any questions about this per se, just the fact that it was an expenditure. And I think the public needs to know at this point, whenever we are spending money, this has been budgeted and everything. I did want to make one point that this is not in redevelopment area. This is outside of that area, so people know that redevelopment is not paying for this project.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Commissioner Ingles.
Is there any possibility of delaying this project a couple of months?
Josh Nordlow, for the record. The thing with Tahoe and delaying projects is we have a dig season up there. So we have to fit within that 4-month basically window to get our projects done. So if we try to push it out, we might miss our window, and that may push this out and have to get rebid next year.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Nordlow. And since there are no further questions, we will be looking for a motion at this point. Commissioner Nelson.
Sure. I move that we award a $443,007 contract to Sierra Nevada Construction Incorporated for the Lake Village Drive Reconstruction Project and authorize the Public Works Director or County Manager to approve change orders up to 10% of the contract amount as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. The motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move on to item E. I'll read that into the record. For possible action, discussion to approve amending the Lake Village Drive Capital Improvement Program budget from $500,000 to $625,000, and 2, award a $78,390 professional services contract to Eastern Sierra Engineering PC to provide construction administration services for the Lake Village Drive Reconstruction Project, and authorize the county manager or public works director to sign the contract and any amendments up to 10% of the original contract price. And 3, approve $75,000 budget transfer from unanticipated projects to the Lake Village Drive Project 20R02. Mr. Erb.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Erb for the record. So my CIP, I kind of set pretty tight in the beginning. And so with construction and construction engineering, over a little bit on the amount that I originally set up of $500,000. So, and I do that because I don't want to pad it because it is public information and people do look at it. So I don't want the impression that there is a room for increased bids or increased negotiations. So I'm coming to you after the fact, that after we've done the scope of work with ESE, and then included in that is the need for, hopefully there's no change orders, but we want a budget in case there is change orders on the construction end as well as on the engineering end. So that's where the $75,000 comes from. The actual construction and the construction engineering were within $21,400 of the original CIP. And then including to cover if there's change orders. That's why I bumped it up to 75,000. Eastern Sierra Engineering, they are the designers on this project. They did the original construction design. They do their own material testing, and they also are gonna do the surveying. And looking at their scope of work and their bid, and the fact that they're gonna also do the certified payroll monitoring, I think they're in the ballpark, the $78,390 that they're requesting is industry standards. So with that, I'll take any questions you have for me.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, this unanticipated projects fund is for unanticipated projects. This is not really technically an unanticipated project, I don't believe. So maybe you can explain that a little better for me.
So that budget that I believe finance is moving away from having that category in the different funds. It was still in this fund. So there is budget there. The unanticipated projects was, I guess, board approved projects from the past when something was to arise that we could use that money for a project. So it is slated for, I guess, different construction needs, and this is a need that I need to tap into that for. I'm not sure if Terry's on the line and if she can kind of elaborate on unanticipated projects a little more.
I don't see her.
Okay.
Paula, do you know if Terry's on the line?
Terry was on the line, but I believe she logged off after consent. I can try and get her back on real quick.
Okay, while you're doing that, any other questions?
Yes, sir. These budgeted items were done when times were good. Is that correct?
I guess I'm not sure if that's why they were set up, so I can't positively give you a yes or no answer on that.
The point I'm trying to make is that it's a lot of money, and when things were different, I just hope we don't run out of money. That's all. Thank you. I'm done.
Hey, John, a question on the account that you're taking this out of is the TD account. Is that correct?
That is correct. And on that account, there's no other future projects scheduled for this money at this time.
And because we've done the two main streets that we have, which is Warrior Way and now this one. Is that correct?
That is correct. The last TD project we did was a participation in the Warrior Way pedestrian path to the signal at Zephyr Cove.
Okay. And there's still money in
other than that, pardon?
There's still money in that account to do snow removal?
Yes, this is money set aside. This isn't operations money. This is
CIP money.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Gregory, you came up on the line. Did you need to make a comment? Okay. Okay. I don't know if they were able to get a hold of Ms. Willoughby or not. I take it because she's not back on the line, or she's not on the line.
Correct. Natalie Wood, for the record, I was not able to get her back on the line.
Okay. Do you want to take a break while we try to get her on the line, gentlemen? Or do you want to proceed? What's the feeling of the board?
I'm okay with proceeding.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Ingles? Okay. Okay. Well, then we will proceed. In order to do that, we would need a motion. Commissioner Nelson?
Sure. I move that we approve the increase to the Lake Village Drive Capital Improvement Program budget from $500,000 to $625,000. Award a $78,390 professional service contract to Eastern Sierra Engineering PC to provide construction administration services for the Lake Village Drive reconstruction project as presented, and authorize the county manager or public works director to sign contract amendments up to 10% of the original contract price.
Second.
I'll second.
I think Larry got in first. A motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move on to item U. And I'll read that into the record. This is for possible action, discussion to authorize the Douglas County Sheriff's Office to purchase and equip one 2020 Ford F-150 truck for an amount not to exceed $58,044. Under Sheriff Elgis.
Thank you, Commissioners. Sheriff Coverly, I'll be addressing this item.
Okay.
This vehicle is being purchased through money that is existing in my budget to date. In my service and supplies budget, we totaled 2 vehicles, chasing a guy down and taking him to jail. And so I need to replace at least one of those. And that's what this is.
I think Commissioner Ingalls at the beginning said it best. At least nobody was hurt on our side. So it was, in my view, a real advantage. Commissioner Nelson, you called for this.
Yeah, I have no problem. This is all within the sheriff's budget. I just wanted to make some comments about the tightening of the budget and the fact that I've heard that there's a couple of assessors' vehicles that we've had on our books for a couple of years that only have about 2,000 miles on them. I would like to make sure that we're looking around for assets that we're not using that may be able to be sold and help the budget. So that was the reason that I really wanted this item pulled, was not necessarily to cause any problems with the sheriff, but to bring up the fact that we may have assets out there otherwise in the county that we have purchased that are not being used to their full extent, that we should be using them. And so it might be possible, like I said, to sell some of those items to help reinforce the budget. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Ingalls, did you have a comment? Yes, not.
As long as,
Go ahead,
Sheriff,
sir.
Are you still using Crown Vics for patrol?
Yes, we are. We are phasing out well, they don't make the Crown Vic police package anymore. The Ford Explorer that you see the guys are driving, that vehicle has replaced the Crown Victoria police car. One thing to kind of comment on Commissioner Nelson's point is I have a lot of vehicles in my fleet. I have a lot of vehicles that are over 10 years old and have more than 100,000 miles on them that are being used every day. Every year we reassess where our fleet is and replace the vehicles as are needed. We work closely with the shop, and then every year we send vehicles to auction to get rid of the ones that we don't need anymore. So we do have a lot of vehicles. We're a large department, comparatively in the county, and we got to have cars to get the job done. So,
Chair.
Mr. Ingalls.
Sheriff Coverly, I know from personal experience how cop work just beats the daylights out of vehicles. So we fully understand what you're up against. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one sidelight comment, I noticed when you were getting the quotes on it that the F-150 was more four-wheel drive was more expensive in Las Vegas than here by about $400 or $500. So I guess it's better to be in Northern Nevada.
Always.
So well done, sir. Any other comments from commissioners?
No.
All right. If not, then we'd be looking for a motion on this one.
Sure, I would move to authorize the Douglas County Sheriff's Office to purchase and equip one 2020 Ford F-150 truck for an amount not to exceed $58,044.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Ingalls. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. And now we'll move on to the administrative calendar. Pull that up. It'll be item 1, and I'll read it into the record. For possible action, discussion to approve a letter of support for Hard Rock's plan for limited phased reopening of the Hard Rock non-gaming areas as requested in a letter received May 12th, 2020, including a presentation from Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Mr. Cates and Joella Sharon. Welcome, Ms. Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I could just give a little bit of background and then we'll turn it over to Joelle.
Before you do, her mic is still muted.
Okay.
Thank you. There you go. And welcome. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received a request from Hard Rock Lake Tahoe to approve their plan for a limited phased reopening of non-gaming areas. As part of the state's declaration of emergency in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic, Governor Sisolak ordered all gaming operations in Nevada to close at midnight on March 17th. As a result of that, Hard Rock Hotel and Casino at State Line had to lay off 421 employees. That has a significant impact on the county's finances, as we have been discussing. The board recently approved an estimate in reductions to room tax of 39% in the next fiscal year, having significant impacts on county services. This includes fundings for community services, the Tahoe Douglas Transportation District, and the Tahoe Douglas Visitors Authority. On May 7th, the governor issued an emergency directive regarding phase 1 of the reopening of Nevada's economy. This includes guidance for a variety of businesses, including those defined as non-essential in previous directions. The guidelines call for gradual reopening of businesses following the strict protocols to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Commissioners, as we have discussed in previous meetings, there is not a current regulatory framework for the county to authorize a business to reopen, given the governor's directives. That's something we've discussed at a recent Board of Health meeting, although obviously the reopening of the casinos, non-gaming or otherwise, is very important to the economy of our county and the livelihood of our residents. And I would urge the commission to seriously consider the request from Hard Rock Lake Tahoe. In your packet is a draft letter of support that the board could send to the Gaming Commission if you like. I know the supplemental package has gotten very large, so if you've had any difficulty locating that, I've separately emailed those to you at the beginning of this meeting. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Joelle Sharon, General Manager with Hard Rock Hotel and Casino at Lake Tahoe.
Ms. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Manager Cates. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. For the record, my name is Joelle Sharon. I'm the general manager of Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Lake Tahoe. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you and present the request to open our non-gaming amenities, which would include our hotel, Alpine Restaurant, and the Oyster Bar Restaurant as well. Also on behalf of Hard Rock, our team here, as well as Diana Bennett, Scott Mankey, our ownership from Paragon Gaming, appreciate all of the support that you have done for small businesses in Douglas County. That is so important and outstanding to show. Obviously, the sooner we can get some of our businesses that rely on the income back in place, the better for all of us. I do want to share our screen. We've got a few slides here I want to just highlight. So hopefully this does work. Did it come up okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. As previously mentioned, I think a little bit, and this is common knowledge, but just to highlight, we did close our casino at midnight on May 17th. That's actually it should be March 17th. I apologize. So obviously, great St. Patrick's Day. And then 12 hours later, we did close our hotel. Unfortunately, as Mr. Cates mentioned, 421 of our employees were impacted. Some good information here to share. We have had to cancel in the last 2 months 6,000 reservations, representing approximately 13,000 room nights and at least $1.6 million in room revenue, which, as spoken already, that has an unfortunate impact on the county as well as us as a business. A highlight of all of this, we did donate all of our perishable food to our employees and to the Boys and Girls Club of Lake Tahoe, who have been very appreciative of it. But the focus now is reopening. And for the last 2 months, we've been listening, learning, how do we reopen safely to protect our guests and our employees? We've used a lot of resources to compile this information that have a lot of protocol prescribed, starting, of course, most importantly with CDC, as well as a lot of information provided in whether the state resources as well as local, in an effort to, like I said, protect our employees who are crucial to all of this. We want to make sure that their health and well-being at work, and then, of course, when they go home to be with their friends and families, that they aren't at risk, and as a result. And then our guests have an expectation to provide a safe and clean experience, and we want to make sure that's highlighted. All of this has been developed and submitted to the Nevada Gaming Control Board for their review as required before we do open. We do want to highlight that we've been monitoring, obviously, the data and the cases in the Quad counties, which is where we live, reside, operate in Douglas County, and fortunately have had really good experience in a low number of cases, and obviously then even more limited in terms of deaths. But to address some of the concerns in terms of bringing visitors, tourists to the region, we've also been monitoring our main drive market, which is where we get the majority, and really Tahoe gets the majority of our tourism business, is from what we would call our south, our drive market south, which is like the Sacramento area. And if you look at those counties, and all of this is public information with the CDC, they've also experienced very low number of cases and low number of deaths, if any, in some of those cases. So like this region, we're doing what we need to be doing to protect ourselves, keeping social distance in mind, wearing masks, and considering all of our community in all of these steps. And we'll continue to do that as required by the Gaming Commission, but also what just makes sense and is good business practices. Happy to address any questions or concerns from commissioners.
All right, well, thank you for the presentation. Can we go back to full? There you go. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ingalls.
I'll direct this to both Mr. Cates and Ms. Schering. I don't know who has jurisdiction over the casinos in Nevada in regard to this matter anymore. It was the governor, and then it was my understanding it's the Gaming Commission. And in support of you guys, I'd like to see all of the casinos open up and just see what happens, because we're doing pretty good. And if all those people coming from California catch Wuhan virus, they can take it back to California. Just leave your money here. But aside from that levity, if we support Hard Rock, why not support all the casinos in conjunction with this endeavor? Thank you.
Commissioner Walsh.
Thank you. I just want to note for the record that there are hospitality properties, motels and hotels open in the Carson Valley. CVI is open. I heard this morning that one of the properties booked rooms for guests that were coming from Lake Tahoe. They were professionals that were actually pilots who flew into Lake Tahoe Airport and had no place to stay up at the lake. So it's a good thing that we're moved towards opening, and I would fully support this letter. Thank you.
Commissioner Rice.
I'm also in support of this letter. The five of us got together and drove all the way to Carson City to hand deliver a message to the door guard. The governor didn't see fit to come out and address us. And they've been playing whatever kind of games they're playing. Who's in charge of what? The governor even established a group of rural leaders. I'm thinking to take the heat off of him so he can say that's their fault. But I am in full support of this letter. I do know that we've already lost one property at the lake, which is going to impact our future budgets. The Harris is talking about a soft opening also. I believe Joel's aware of that. We sit on several committees that share information back and forth. So I think that we would be doing our county a disservice if we did not approve this wholeheartedly and send it out this off to the powers that be.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, I think that it's too bad that the hotels have been closed down. I'm not sure that was a wise decision in the first place, but a lot of the hotels and casinos did stay open, and just keeping people away from the gaming machines seems to be the best thing. So I'm totally in support of this. I hope we can all get back to normal sooner than later, and I hope that's by the 15th of June that we can really get everything going again. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I noticed today on the news that Fandango opened, and one of the reasons they were able to open, and probably the reason that Hard Rock will be able to open, is that they didn't have to travel through the casino games are. They could go directly to the restaurant. And the Gaming Control Board approved their opening to serve food, and I think that's pretty much what you're looking to do too. And I think Commissioner Engel's point about the rest of them, we ought to support the rest of them. I totally agree with that. In this particular case, this is the first letter that we received. And so we decided to put it on the agenda as quickly as we could and get the support out, because have you already submitted your letter to the Gaming Control Board?
We have. We actually just did that today.
Yeah, okay, so we follow up with a letter. I think it's great that we have 5 folks on the commission that want to support this, and I want to thank the other commissioners for their support for you. Having said that, Commissioner Rice.
One of the things I've never understood about any of this is that the Gaming Commission ordered the machines turned off and the tables closed. So what difference does it make? And I know I'm asking the wrong people the right question, what difference does it make if they walk through the casino or not if they can't do any gaming because all the machines are turned off? I just never understood that. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And thank you for bringing that to us.
Any other comments? Commissioner Ingalls.
Commissioner Rice, you're trying to use simple logic, and none of this makes any sense.
Agreed there. Anyone else? Well, if there's no further questions on this, we'd be looking for a motion.
I would move to approve a letter of support for the Nevada Gaming Control Board for the Hard Rock Lake Tahoe's plan for a limited phased reopening of its non-gaming areas.
Second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson, a second by Commissioner Walsh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? No nays. The motion carries 5-0, and we wish you the best of luck in getting this done.
Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
You got our full support. So, all right, we'll move on to item number 2 then. Read this into the record. For possible action, discussion to commit an additional $400,000 in matching funds from Douglas County to support the better utilization investments to leverage development build grant application for the construction management, and final design of phase 2 of the Muller Parkway project. This approval will increase Douglas County's previous approved financial commitment of $3,600,000 to a total of $4 million and save the county an estimated $1.6 million in additional project costs. Mr. Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I would say, a repeat of the May 7th agenda item where we asked the board to make a tentative commitment of $3.6 million as a match for the build grant that we submitted on the 18th, on Monday. We reported at the 7th, on the meeting on the 7th, that we would be submitting that grant on the 18th. However, we had overlooked some of the costs, and I want to apologize to the board for that. That was an oversight and miscommunication between myself, staff, and Far West Engineering who developed the grant. What we presented to you on the 7th were the costs for construction only. What we omitted were the costs for final design. As I reported on the 7th, we are currently at 30% design. So this would be dollars to finish the design as well as construction management, which would increase the total amount that was presented on the 7th by approximately $2 million. And the county share of that would be $400,000. So we're asking you to approve an additional $400,000 as potential match for the build grant. I would like to point out that this is not a final commitment of money. The board is not committed and the county is not committed unless and until we are awarded the build grant and the build grant is accepted by the board. Otherwise, there is no obligation. But whenever we are looking to utilize matching funds for a grant that is not already budgeted, we bring that to the board for approval. County policy does not require grant applications to be approved by the board, but we certainly wanted to make sure there was a tentative commitment of the funding there. In terms of the affordability of this in the current fiscal crisis, I would just say that it will be a while before this project is ready to move forward. It will be quite some time before we get notice of federal award. There's no guarantee we will get that at all. If we do get that, then we will have to proceed to find a contractor through the CMAR process that can finish design and help manage the project and do construction. That process will take several months. The design process will take several months. my best estimate is that we would not be prepared to start construction until the summer of 2022. I do not believe that we would need to sell bonds until that time. So that would be a commitment for the bond payments in future biennia. We should have enough money to do design work and cash flow and draw grant money down. But by the time we get to construction, that's when we would need to sell bonds. And with that, that's the gist of it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions from the board? Commissioner Engels.
Mr. Cates, what is the status of the weed abatement program in the county right now?
The weed abatement program?
Is it fully funded?
This fiscal year, it's fully funded. Next fiscal year, there are some reductions proposed, and we'll be talking about that. I'll briefly talk about that in a later agenda item, as well as next week.
Well, we're talking about it right now, and this is real serious because I've been talking to a lot of the ranchers, and they are scared about having any reduction in the weed abatement program. One of the things we have here in this valley is we have certified weed-free hay, which comes at a premium, and there's not many places in the West where you can even get this. And this program, if anything, should have more support to support our ranchers who bring in money to help us. Now, I think that has priority over committing to anything like this, because this is here and now, and these old boys, they generate money for the county. What do you say?
We're going to be talking about that as part of the budget.
Who are you addressing it to? Me or
I'm talking to Cates.
Okay.
Because we're spending a lot of money. We're spending an awful lot of money, and we know that there's some hard times coming down the road. But weeds won't stop growing, and it is a paramount consideration to maintain at minimum our weed abatement program. It's a very serious consideration. So all of these other things that cash is being committed to, and then we've got a situation now, 400K. Now, can we put this off a little bit to wait and see what happens?
Well, we can put it off because we're not going to get a grant award probably this middle of next fiscal year. And the board will have an opportunity to either accept or decline the grant if we were to get it. So we don't have to make a commitment of money today.
So this is an item of discussion or action?
If we don't make the effort to get to the bill grant, we won't have the opportunity to make a decision whether to accept or receive it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, I think my problem with this is, once again, is the cart before the horse. This was already submitted, and here we are now asked to approve it. I don't know about the rest of you, but this is what you should have read before voting on this. I didn't get even an indication of this until yesterday. There's no way anybody on this board can read all of this and make a decision on this in this short time. I'm not going to do a Pelosi and say, let's pass this, and then we'll see what's in it. This is totally unprofessional as a county. We do things and then we come back and ask to have it approved. I just don't think that's the way things should be done. And I personally will not vote for this because it is just not time to read all this material. The supplemental becomes part of this, and it's just not something that we should be doing.
Commissioner Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understood the action we took back on May 7th, we approved the submittal of the application to the bill grant. Is that correct, Mr. Cates?
That is correct, and you approved the tentative funding for it as well. The grant policy that was reviewed and approved by the Internal Audit Committee and the board does not require the commission to read every grant application and approve the application itself. It is only upon award that the board needs to act to accept the grant.
Thank you. And then I just want to address Commissioner Engels. I've received probably 8 or 10 phone calls from various ranchers around the valley. And I agree that the weed control program is absolutely essential, not only for the ranchers, but for the people who are downstream from the Carson River, downstream from us. We don't want seeds going into other counties that could be generated here. So I'm in full support of the weed abatement program, but we're going to discuss that, I guess, on Monday or Tuesday. Is that correct?
For the record, Patrick Cates, we will be discussing that Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to give you a little preview of that later in this agenda. And I don't want to stray too far from the agenda, but I will say that we are looking at having a pot of money for the commission to look at as we look at some of these cuts. If there's things you want to move money around and restore some of these, you can certainly do that. And I certainly had to do a lot of thinking about those recommended reductions to the weed program. I understand full well how important it is, but we had to make cuts across the board, and they're proposed at this time, and it's up to the commission to decide what to implement.
Commissioner Rice?
I think that the 5 of us are in total agreement when it comes to the weed abatement program. However, that's a discussion for another time. And it appears from everything that I've been able to find out about this particular item is that by approving this extra money, which would raise the total to $4 million, we are in effect also saving $1.6 million in additional project costs. And this is money that we're not paying up front. This is money that we will never pay unless we get the bill grant, is my understanding. Is that correct, sir?
That is absolutely correct. And that's why I made the decision to change the amounts in the grant request in advance of bringing this to the board so that we could meet the deadline. It is not a firm commitment of funding. We're under no obligation unless we get the award and the board receives it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, another thing I object to in this is on page 16 of the application, it goes into quite a bit of detail about the possibility, not even possibility, the way it's stated is that this is part of the plan, the farm conservancy community model. All I've seen is that in the paper. We've never discussed that as a board, and yet here it is in this application. That doesn't make any sense to me. How can you put something in the application that we haven't even discussed? Mr. Cates, please explain how these things get into the application.
Again, the application was put together by our consultant and our staff. The board did not review and approve all the language for the build grant last year, nor did they do that for other grants.
Okay, I'm reading it this year, and I'm finding things in here that are maybe never going to come to pass that we're putting in this grant application. It's a dream at this point, and it sounds like it's already been approved in this document. I think that's misleading to the people that are going to be reading this grant. Am I wrong?
I don't know what to say to that, sir.
Yeah, you don't know what to say. There you go.
Yeah, that ain't gonna cut it, Cates. Why is this even on the agenda?
So the board can be informed and consent to the increase in potential cost to the county should there be an award.
But you have it in as an action item. We're making a commitment.
A tentative commitment of funding, correct, which you're not obligated for unless there's award and you accept it.
Then why have an action item right now?
I think it's more to inform everybody. There's no perfect answer to the questions that you're posing. But I think that what I perceive happened is that they realized they did not have the modality for the 70%, which is the rest of the design work. So they included it in the grant that they've written, and they wanted to inform us that that's in the grant, that it really did go up $2 million. And the portion that the county would have to pay is the $400,000. That's if we get the grant. I look at this as more, they're informing us of what the situation is and trying to be transparent by informing everybody by informing us. Because I don't think anybody here knew this until it was published in the agenda. And Dave, I saw what you held up, which has got to be probably 1,000 pages. But if you read the grant application, which you have, you see
16, I just quoted, yes.
Yes. But if you look at all the addendums, like I went through a couple of the addendums, that probably the one that caught my eye that really was interesting to me was the archaeological and history addendum. And it's 62 pages of bureaucratic relisting of the history of the world. And the bottom line is, at the very beginning, they said there's no historical problem or archaeological problem with the path that the Muller Parkway is going to take. But it took them 62 pages to tell you that. Now, a lot of that is pro forma. The grant calls for a certain number of things in it. Should we approve it? Well, at this point, it's not an approval. It's a request. We've gone in with a request to give us grant monies. That's
my problem, Barry, is that I don't know what is in this, and who knows what's buried in that 62 pages. You've got to read it all to know what's there. I'm not going to read the first paragraph of a contract and sign it because it sounds okay. I've got to read every paragraph. If you think you can just go ahead and approve something reading the first paragraph, you're going to get in financial trouble.
We're not approving. We're not approving at this point. Gates, are we approving anything
that is not accurate at this point? It is not accurate.
Okay, that's a good opinion. Commissioner Ingalls.
I move that we put this agenda item to out further and wait and see what happens with the county and the revenue. From what everybody has said, this is just for information. I don't know why it's an action item. And there's information coming out up on Topsy Lane. There's a lot of stores that are closing up there right now. So this whole thing that is going on, both nationally and within the state on this virus, we don't know where it's going to take us. Now, Mr. Nelson has a point. We don't know what we're committing to here. I don't know what we're committing to. You're saying, oh, we're just information. Well, an action item is a commitment. If it was for discussion, that would be completely different, but it's not. And
we can change it to that.
Huh?
We can change it to that. We can just say it's, thank you for the information.
Well, okay, then let's do
further.
that.
And you've proposed to bring it back for discussion. I don't have a problem with that. Mr. Cates, is there a problem with doing that?
No, sir.
Okay, so,
I have a question.
Mr. Rice.
Is this something that we should do sooner rather than later so that we can apply for the build grant?
It's already applied.
Yeah, we submitted the bill grant on Monday.
I had no knowledge of that, and we had a 2-on-1 this week, and I asked you, after you were 20 minutes late to the meeting, what was going on. You know nothing. So apparently people know things about all of these, and there's a couple of us commissioners just left in the dark for some reason or other. And this isn't the first time it's happened. I can't even get some agenda items on the agenda. I've had agenda items from March of 2019 that have never made it onto the agenda. Thank you.
When the board considered this on the 7th, I specifically stated that we would be submitting the bill grant on the 18th. That's on the record.
Right.
My question, sir, is what happens if we do not approve this today?
So I don't know if the DAs can answer that, but to me, there is no consequence unless and until we get a bill grant award and the board accepts it.
Ritchie? Mr. Ritchie?
Thank you, Chairman. Doug Ritchie with the District Attorney's Office. Mr. Cates is correct. What this item does is informs the board that the build grant application includes additional funding, and that as a consequence, there's a additional match requirement. The county's commitment to expend those monies will not come until the build grant application is approved. And specifically when the engineering that's associated with this particular amount comes forward for the contracts is brought forward to the board for approval, as we do with any other project when we're constructing public infrastructure.
So to go back to the question, this doesn't need to be an action item right this minute. This is for discussion. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chairman. Doug Ritchie again for the record. That's correct. The board does not have to take action on this item today because the funding won't be required until probably next year when, if the bill grant is approved.
Right. Mr. Ricker, you had a comment?
Yeah, Commissioner Phil Ritker, Director of Public Works for the record, and I was the principal at the end here who worked with the consulting group on the submission of the bill grant. It was in a traditional construction project, in order to be shovel ready by the definition of the federal and Department of Transportation, you'd have to do all of the design work up front, which would mean that work would be funded outside of the grant money that is awarded by the federal, by the build process. By going forward with the CMAR project, and that's why this is being brought forward, but going forward as a CMAR project, we're actually able now to take the additional design work from 30% design up to 100% design and capture that as costs that are allowed to be spent within the build grant program. Hence the significant area, the increase here in what we're requesting. The other thing is this additional commitment of $400,000 is to a bonding process that we would be doing, and the estimated annual cost for this increase is about $30,000 a year. So we're not looking at having to fund $400,000. It's really funding a long-term commitment, annual commitment of $30,000 in addition to what we'd be funding for the first $3.6 million in bond payments. With regards to the grant application process, we're obviously applying for grants, and the federal process knows this. The build grant process knows this. They're looking for statements about quality of life. There's a section in here on what they call state of repair, which is a statement basically on funding in terms of how we repair and maintain our current road systems. Because this is all forward-looking information. This is not. It's already in the books. It's already in the can. If it was, we wouldn't be asking to be building roads or improving things. So in that, we project out what a vision for the valley looks like, or what a vision for this, if this road goes in, what it does. And it obviously provides access to a very underutilized and large industrial park area to the east of us off of Buckeye Road, as well as the developments that's tied in with some of the easements and grants that have been awarded. Whether it becomes an neighborhood or whether it becomes just strictly 2,500 homes, we don't know. But the intent in the build grant, and there's no deception here, is to provide a picture of what is possible and what can result from a project like this. It's just part of that process. You're forward looking, not looking backwards.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Ricker? Any questions overall? Seeing none, are we willing to accept this as a report and reschedule it for, is there an advice from either Mr. Ricker or Mr. Cates as to when it should be rescheduled?
Mr. Chairman, it's up to the board if you want to reschedule a fuller conversation of what's in the build grant. There really isn't any further action that's required. Again, unless we get an award, there isn't any action for the board to take. So it's up to the board if you want to have further detailed discussions on what was submitted in the build grant.
Okay, so if we accept this information and schedule, is there a need by the board, let's put it that way, to schedule another session on what's in the build grant? Commissioner Nelson?
I would suggest that we not hear this until after the budget is put to bed in June.
Okay, there's a good suggestion. Anybody disagree or have another suggestion? Okay, and Mr. Ritchie, we don't need to have a motion on that, do we?
Turn your
Hey,
mic.
you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Doug Ritchie for the record. No, Your Honor. The board doesn't have to take action on this.
Here come the judge.
Yeah, and Your Honor. Okay, so we can just accept the information and move on to the next
Item. Yeah.
Does that meet with everybody's approval, or do you all want a motion of any sort? Seeing none.
Okay.
Commissioner Engels, go ahead.
No, I think this is a prudent thing to do.
All right. Well, wow. Do we record this date? All right. We'll move on to item number 3. Pull it up. Okay, let me get this. This is for presentation only. Update on the current fiscal status of Douglas County, including the county's progress on implementing the COVID-19 financial response plan for FY 2019-20, as well as progress on the FY 2020-21 final budget. Discussion may also include an overview of the fiscal status of the state of Nevada and the potential ramifications to Douglas County. Mr. Cates and Ms. Willoughby, before they start out, I've actually asked them to come forward on this. And I want us to be particularly aware of the typical state process when they don't have any money, but they want to make a requirement. And they give us what is called an unfunded mandate. So that's part of the purpose for this briefing. Go ahead, Mr. Cates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me a second here to get this.
Welcome,
presentation
Colby.
up.
And you're muted in case you
Oh.
didn't know it.
Okay, let me try to share my screen. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So this is very much a work in progress, but wanted to just kind of let you know where we're at. Make this work here. Why isn't that working? There we go. Just a brief background of what got us to the place we are with our fiscal emergency. The governor declared a state of emergency for Nevada back on March 12th. The board followed with a state of emergency for the county. March 18th, the governor issued a directive shutting down non-essential businesses and significantly limiting essential businesses. On the 27th, I issued a memo instituting a hiring freeze and a call to cease non-essential expenditures in the county. And on March 31st, the governor issued a travel advisory. Those actions basically shut down significant portions of the state and the county's economy. However, most of those actions were pretty consistent with what was being done in other states as well. I think virtually every state issued something like this to curtail people mixing and to try to stop the spread of the virus. Board actions to date related to the budget. On April 7th, the board approved a tentative budget for FY 2021. That was due to the Department of Taxation on April 15th. Because of all the changes that happened so abruptly, we did not make any changes to the budget, to the tentative budget that was submitted. It was built using fiscal year 18-19 actual expenditures as a base. There were, as I said, no adjustments made for impacts of the emergency. We included no supplemental requests. We had been prepared to have department heads give presentations and talk about their supplemental requests. We put all that on hold. The tentative budget that we submitted included total revenues of just over $121 million, with expenditures of $115 million across all funds. On May 7th, we had a meeting and the board approved revenue estimates that we would use in building the FY 2021 budget. That was a decrease of a little more than $11 million compared to the revenue that was included in the tentative budget. That include a 2.5% decrease to the general fund, a 39% decrease to the room tax fund, and a 22% decrease to the PAL sales tax fund, among other reductions. Those were the significant ones. Future actions that the board needs to take. June 1 is the statutory deadline to submit the final budget to the Department of Taxation. So we have to come up with a balanced budget and get it submitted by that deadline. We have meetings scheduled for the 26th and the 27th for the board to review and approve the proposed final 2021 budget. It includes a variety of reductions across programs that we balance the budget. I just want to say that what you approve next week is not the final word on our budgets. It allows us to meet the statutory requirements with Department of Taxation and gives us a starting point for next fiscal year. It will be critical that we continue to monitor our budget performance, see how the revenue is coming in, and there may be additional action that is needed by the board in order to keep the budget balanced throughout the year. You have to understand there is some significant delays in economic activity and when we collect revenue. So we're not going to see the results of a lot of this until we start moving into the next fiscal year. in terms of decreases in revenue. We do plan to maintain the hiring freeze and the ban on non-essential expenditures until our fiscal outlook improves. Just a few highlights of some of the things that you'll see in our budget. We have uploaded material for the meetings next week, and there's some summaries that go through some of these reductions. There are also some detailed reports that we provided that you all can have an opportunity to look through. But just as a highlight, I call them lowlights actually, because it's depressing to look at these kind of reductions. But for the general fund, we're looking at reductions in services and supplies category across the board. That's a variety of things, from supplies to travel, to training, to contract services. We're proposing holding 7 positions vacant. There is a salary savings offset. What that is we calculated the average amount of salary savings in the budget historically, based on, you never spend all of your salary usually because you have vacancies and turnover, and there's always some vacancy rate there. So that has never been included in the county's budgets before, and we went through and calculated a conservative estimate, which we will diligently manage to throughout the fiscal year. There are some increased utilization of restricted fees in order to lower the general fund obligation. We did have some workers' comp adjustments to the sheriff's budget. Actually, the tentative budget we discovered had some errors in the calculations for workers' comp for police fire. And when we adjusted those, it made some pretty significant savings to the sheriff's budget. So that really helped. We also have a proposal to suspend community grants. I would point out that community grants typically are granted for projects for nonprofits and other entities. They usually are not going to ongoing operating. So that seemed like a reasonable thing to suspend until our fiscal outlook improves. And as we discussed in the last agenda item, there is a decrease to the Nature Conservancy contract for the weed control program. It's not eliminated it. We reduced it by a little over a third. I know from my experience with Department of Wildlife and just my personal interest in range management, how vital that program is. We didn't wipe it out. There is still funding there. I know that'll be a hard decision for the board. I also want to point out that there is a reduction to transfers to the library and community services proposed as well. For the room tax fund, the proposal is to hold 2 full-time and 22 part-time seasonal positions vacant, reductions to services and supplies, and we have a proposal to spend down some of the room tax reserves, which have built up quite a bit and have been used for projects. So there's some money there that we can do to soften the blow. Without that, we would potentially be looking at closing facilities and making some more dramatic cuts. We think this is a prudent thing to do while we enter into the next fiscal year and continue to monitor performance. The library fund, there's some significant reductions there. The recommendation is to hold 3 positions vacant, and there's some significant reductions to services and supplies. Library materials is proposed to be reduced by 85%. I will point out, since the schedules that we have posted that showed the reduction to transfers of the library, we are going to recommend restoring some of that. So instead of a 50% reduction to the general fund transfer, to be a 31% reduction, which I think helps them out a lot. The library board had a meeting. I had assumed that there was a discussion about this budget, but I have subsequently learned in the last day that the library board has not had a chance to look at these proposed reductions as of yet. Future challenges as we go forward, a lot of uncertainties, right? We're kind of in very uncharted territory. We've never had an event like this where the entire global economy was shut down because of a pandemic. Well, at least not for 100 years anyway. A lot of unknowns. How fast will the economy rebound? Specifically, how fast will tourism and leisure rebound? Will reopening continue without disruption? If there is another spike, there could be future shutdowns. We don't know what that's going to look like. Questions about vaccines and therapeutics, if those will come online and make an impact and allow us to get back to normal. Those are all big unknowns, and I know there's a lot of opinions out there about what this recovery is going to look like. All I will say is that this is an economic slowdown that is how do I want to say it? That is created by an external source. It's not like the Great Recession, where it was a meltdown in the financial markets and subprime mortgages in particular. There were no systemic problems with our economy before this happened. So it's unclear how it would restart. You know, I was thinking through this myself. You know, the only thing I could think of that was similar, and in many ways it's not similar, but if you look at what happened to the US economy during World War II, there were artificial constraints, a war in Europe and Japan, a global war, and the means of production were seized by the government, and a substantial portion of the workforce was sent overseas, and it substantially disrupted the American economy. But after the war was over, we saw one of the biggest booms in U.S. economic history, as well as a baby boom. This is certainly not World War II, but it's just an example of how unprecedented this is, and it's not like a normal recession. So how things are going to bounce back, we just don't know. Some reasons for optimism, I would call this very cautious optimism. The federal stimulus, namely the CARES Act specifically, provided significant liquidity to the economy to soften the economic blow. There is a new stimulus bill, a $3 trillion bill that has passed the House. That does include funding for relief to states and local governments. However, it is not clear if that will pass. It did pass the House. There is opposition to it in the Senate Republicans. So it remains to be seen if that will pass or not. And there have been some recent developments showing some promise on vaccines and therapeutics that could, if not produce a cure, at least produce some treatments that would mitigate some of the more significant health impacts from COVID-19. That would be a real game changer and allow the economy to open up much faster. I talked about some reasons for cautions, how unprecedented this slowdown is. And the other reason to be cautious is significant fiscal shortfalls projected for the state. And I was going to put some slides together on that. However, I thought better of it, and I thought I'd rather just talk in general terms about it. The reason I didn't want to put slides together on that is, well, frankly, in the last year, there's been a lot of institutional knowledge lost at the state with the change in administrations, and I didn't necessarily want to give them any ideas they don't already have.
Good.
But I will say this: the state is facing estimated shortfalls for the current fiscal year, which ends next month, anywhere between $600 and I think $800 million was the figure I saw. I know the governor has asked state agencies to cut almost $700 million from their budgets. That's for the current fiscal year. The estimates for next fiscal year of their shortfall are anywhere between $1 to $2 billion. That $2 billion is almost half of the state general fund. So that is significant. And that is because their revenue sources are far more volatile in their general fund than our general fund. Ours is composed mostly of property taxes. Theirs is composed significantly of sales taxes and gaming taxes. And obviously they're not getting any gaming revenue, and sales, I'm sure, are falling significantly without all the tourism associated with gaming. So what does that mean for the county? Well, the state, one way or another, will certainly look to the counties to help shore up their own budgets. There's a variety of ways that could happen. I would see that there's a likelihood that some of the social services that the state provides, they would find ways to push those programs or the funding of those programs down to local government. They've done that in the past. They've done that in prior recessions. So I think that you could see some unfunded mandates from the social services side of things. They could change any of the laws that they want. They could sweep some funds. They could change the tax structure. They could go after sales taxes. There's a whole host of things that are potential. Again, we don't know what any of that's going to look like. Obviously, if that stimulus bill were to pass Congress, that would have a significant impact on what that looks like. Nothing will happen in that regard until the governor calls a special session of the legislature. I'm not sure when that is going to happen. If I had to guess, I would assume that in June he would probably call a special session and have them look at their budget for next fiscal year, because this is, the state does a 2-year biennial budget, and so the legislature would not normally meet to consider next year's budget. But obviously they're going to have to declare a special session. And there's a lot of different ways it could go that could end up costing us more money. So there's definitely a lot of uncertainty and risk there. And I think that's all I've got. Yeah, that's it for the presentation. So any questions about all of that?
Yes.
Mr. Ingles.
I don't know why you singled out the weed abatement program. I mean, this is one thing we just cannot cut, because if those ranchers get overwhelmed and lose their certification and go out of, this whole thing is completely irreversible. So whatever we do, we've got to figure out a way to maintain that weed abatement program, period.
I think what we first, before we make a decision on it, we need the weed abaters to give us a presentation, because the Nature Conservancy is not the one that provides the weed abatement. The only fund that the general fund program, besides the animal control that Scott Morgan controls, is weed abatement. And I don't understand what they're all doing in that process. And I think we need to understand the program before we would make any kind of decision on it. Who's doing what?
I'm concerned that it's been singled out, and I don't know why.
Well, the library's been singled out too, right? But
the library can come back. If these guys are forced out of business and we'd start to overwhelm them, I mean, it's irreversible. That's a whole.
Well, I understand that. And that's been going on. And if you talk to Clarence Burr, you'd find out that it's not just the ranchers, it's the people that have small ranches that allow weeds to propagate and blow off their property. So this is a whole program. This is not just isolated, just the ranchers. It's for all the people in the valley, the residents included. And how we're doing that. And are we going to up the fees? Because if you have weeds, you can actually have it abated by the weed control folks, and they'll send you a bill. And if it's that bad,
I know full well how it works. You see that fence behind me? That's part of my land, and I spray it constantly. And I've had the weed guys out here, Begovich and them, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I know it's not just the ranchers; it's the valley in general. It's But the thing I don't understand is why in all of these items it was singled out. So anyway,
it was a good question, fair question. I think they'll come up with an answer. Ms. Willoughby.
Yeah, I think Patrick mentioned them, but they were not singled out. We all put cuts forward in the general fund, and I could say there's not going to be any easy decisions for the board on Tuesday and Wednesday. These are all valuable programs, and everybody's taking a reduction. Patrick just happened to mention one of them. So they're not singled out for reductions. Everyone had reductions and
Commissioner Ingles.
all of those. And again, it's up to the board to make that decision. It's not our choice.
Commissioner Ingles.
Ms. Willoughby, I understand what you're saying, but something leaked out. And I started getting a blizzard of phone calls from the ranchers. And I never even hear from those old boys. And they work hard and they just don't pay too much attention to what we're dealing with.
Right.
But all of a
And so
sudden,
it's-
I find out that you've already got a predetermined decision about weed abatement.
No, there's no decisions. That's a board decision as to what your priorities are of funding. And I can say if you're going to not cut the weed control program and subsidize that program, then something else will have to be reduced. And that's a board decision as to priorities.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I appreciate the remarks. Since we are in this, everybody calls it uncharted territory. To me, it seems a lot similar to other charts that we've been in and territories, because we're always talking about either we have the money or we don't. I would like to know if you have considered transferring tax increment specifically from the swimming pool district, and what that would look like and how that would help or not help. And I've talked about this before, but it seems like, is that going to be part of the discussion? Ms. Willoughby?
Patrick, do you want me to take that or do you want to?
Sure, go ahead.
So that would be a long-term decision, and it's not going to help this year's budget at all. So it's definitely something for consideration as far as long-term planning, but it not something that we could accomplish in time to affect this fiscal year. It's the same with looking at pension costs. That would not affect current employee and personnel costs, so that would be part of a long-term planning discussion.
In the cash management report that we get, the cash report, one of the items at the very bottom was employee benefits. And is there an employee benefit account? What can you explain to me what that is?
Sure, that's a part of the cash report that was on today's agenda. So
Yeah,
it's clear. It's a trust account. So when we make deductions for employees, so we deduct for their insurance benefits, we put that money in there and then we pay the benefits out. So it's a wash.
Okay.
And if the balance fluctuates, depend on payroll timing and payments out to the different to the insurance companies or to PERS. So if we have we put the PERS out from each payroll into that account, and then we make the payments to PERS out of there.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, I just, because whenever you talk about employee benefits, it's always a moving target in cost because they're always going up. Do you have any feel for what the insurance programs are going to do into next year?
That would be Ms. Lang. I don't think she's on the call. We could certainly bring that
But
back.
that's going to be discussed next week?
I can add that as part of the discussion.
And do you know what PERS is going to do?
I have not heard from PERS. I did see a report that Nevada PERS is considered one of the strongest retirement funds in the nation, in a ranking from 0 to whatever. They were towards the top as far as stability, which is a good place to be.
So it's unlikely there'll be a big increase in PERS?
I can't say that. I'm not going to say that. I don't know. So I'm just saying I have Google alerts on Nevada PERS. So that was one of the articles I just saw that was very interesting.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll definitely have challenges. I do think that we're in good shape going into this, as good a shape as we can be in terms of cash and reserves. I think that's an important aspect of this. And when we're going to discuss these programs and kind of to abate some of the fears about canceling or changing the programs, since we have reserves, is this a time when we would need to spend out of the reserves? You basically talked about that in the room tax, but is that an overall policy discussion that we should have?
We will be talking about that next week during the budget hearing. You do have a fund balance, a general fund balance, and budget policy that calls for a balanced budget. However, it does allow use of reserves under certain conditions. And so if you're going to use reserves, you would make a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah, and will you be coming up with recommendations on using reserves?
It's up to the board.
Entirely. Well, I know that, but I'd like to have some sense from the staff what their recommendation is. I think
so. We'll be presenting what we have so far, and then if you want to make changes, we'll talk about how we would fund that and how it would come out of reserves.
I also think there is an opportunity to look at some of the transfers out of the general fund that could be used to reprioritize some things. We're already proposing a little bit of that, but that's why we went through that $4.2 million of transfers out, some of which hasn't been reviewed by the board in a long time. So that may give you some wiggle room as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, just a statement about PERS. Being number 4 in the nation probably is not still that great. The public employee retirements throughout the country are in pretty bad shape. So who knows what PERS is going to do. And on reserves, I would suggest that we not reduce reserves at this point, try to cut costs as much as possible rather than try to use up our reserves. We don't know how long this thing is going to go on and how long we're going to have reserves out there to carry us through. So that'd be my comment about that.
I'd like to evaluate it and see what the pros and cons are. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well then I think we've actually had a good discussion on this, and we'll look forward to Tuesday and Wednesday, and I appreciate the updates and the forewarnings. So thank you very much, Ms. Wilby and Mr. Cates. So at this point, we'll go back to the agenda and we'll call for reports or updates from, this is the last item, from county commission members concerning the various boards and or commissions that they may be a member of or liaison to, or meetings or functions they have attended. We'll start on my screen. I got Mr. Rice on the left, and we'll go to the right, which would end with Commissioner Ingalls. Go ahead, Commissioner Rice.
Okay, as you have probably heard, at the LTBA, we voted last week, or was it this week? So many meetings, I can't remember which one was where. Anyway, we voted to not have the lights on the lake fireworks display this year on the 4th of July. That's gone.
All right.
There's a possibility that we will bring a abbreviated fireworks show back for Labor Day weekend, but that's something we will determine later on down the stream. As far as the Century 21 Golf Classic, it may or may not happen, but if it does happen, it'll be without a gallery. And that's up to the TV channel that'll be sponsoring that. So they haven't made that determination yet, but if it does happen, it'll be without a gallery. And if it does happen, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on 17 and 18, where the golf course is right next to the lake. That's always been a fun zone, as it were. So, and the concert series at Harvey's has been canceled for this year. There will be no concert series at all. And the LTVA and the TDVA have been putting out, Lake Tahoe is here. We will be here when this is over. Until then, please stay home. And the president of the associations said that she never thought that she would ever say this, but please don't come to Lake Tahoe. So on the California side, which is they've been far more draconian than we have on the Nevada side. We've been bad enough, but over there, South Lake Tahoe isn't going to be opened, and they say that there's still a travel ban over there. Their VHRs were not considered as essential businesses, and even the people that have second homes are just now being allowed to visit their Lake Tahoe home. So things will be very quiet on the California side. We do have restaurants reopening on our side up here at the lake. I know that Edgewood is reopened, and the Hard Rock is trying to open theirs. I'm not sure what Harris and Harvey's are going to do. I know that Harvey's is going to remain dark after Harris goes back into business, but life has been easing up quite a bit here at the lake, and a lot of people are still going out to dinner, but still practicing the safe distance mandates, as well as many folks.
I'll do what, listen.
Okay.
Many folks are wearing masks and practicing the good practices. So that's about it for the commissions that I am on.
Thank you very much. Next is Commissioner Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I have to report is last night I attended a meeting with the Carson board meeting with the Carson Water Subconservancy District. We had a fascinating presentation on their new drone program, which they have initiated to monitor the Carson watershed. And all I can say is that this new technology is going to be great in the future for possible weed abatement control, for example. They are monitoring the erosion along the river and even monitoring the river course changes that are happening over time. So with this new program, it's really going to help not only the watershed or the conservancy to better monitor the watershed, but also to help the landowners along the Carson River as well. Very fascinating news, just in its infancy, and I look for great things in the future. Thank you.
Can I ask Commissioner Walsh a question?
Sure, Commissioner Ingles, ask away.
Commissioner Walsh, in regard to that meeting, was anything said about the water availability for this season?
We've heard in the past that we're about 69 or 72% of average runoff this year. I think those were the numbers. We heard that about a month or two ago.
It's 80% for Carson Valley.
Now? Okay, 80% for the Carson Valley. Thank you. So that's what we're looking at right now. If that answers your question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, the law library had a meeting and nothing exciting happened there. So
what?
Believe it?
Fascinating.
Yeah. But they have transferred the law library over to the regular library, and it's being set up over there at this point. So that's pretty much what's going on there.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Ingles.
There hasn't been any meetings. They're all shut down.
All right. I do have one question. Since we approved this letter for the casino, when will it be ready for us to sign and get it up to the Gaming Control Board?
So the letter is prepared. I'll work with Natalie and the other staff as soon as we're done with this meeting to have it prepared for you all to come and sign.
Tomorrow?
I imagine we can do that today or tomorrow.
Okay, great. Does that meet with everybody's schedule?
Yep.
Okay, doable.
Much.
Okay. And Larry made my report, basically. The Nevada Association of Counties has been real active on what is called the LEAP, which is it's the Governor Sisolak's advisory council, made up of 4 people, and it's JJ Kokachia and Marilyn Kirkpatrick from Washoe County. There's a Rob. Well, there's a commissioner from the Washoe County and the executive director of the Nevada Association of Counties. And they've been very responsive to try to get things out of the governor, but sometimes it goes in but never comes back out. They're working on specifically that will affect us is the reopening of churches. Today, perhaps he will make a report, maybe it's on now, but we'll find out what he's going to do about entering into phase 2 and relaxing the restriction on churches, which is, I don't know about you all, but that's one thing that I've really been getting a lot of calls on. And so I'm interested in that. There's also the other issue is opening tattoo parlors. And I'm sure that Commissioner Rice is tired of having to go to California for that. So I don't know that we even have a tattoo parlor in Douglas County, but they're working on
a couple of
those. Say again?
There's a couple of them, I believe.
Well, estheticians do that permanent makeup. I don't know what it falls
We
into.
we have one up here at the lake. It's the old Bill's building.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we have one there, along with the my wife's least favorite hamburger joint because she doesn't like their advertising. But and I know that we have a couple there on 395 going through town in West.
Close to the S's. Yeah.
So I think we have at least 4.
Okay. Okay. Well, they're working on trying to get them through the process. So.
Oh yeah, boy, do I want one of those.
Yeah. And then the last part is that the Gaming Commission is really the one that's going to allow the casinos to reopen, and then all the casinos are working with them. And to Mr. Engel's point earlier, I believe that we'll receive more requests to forward after they get their plans all set, forward a support letter for them. So we should look at that coming up. Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of the owners of restaurants that have bars and some gaming machines that they may be allowed to start having their machines, every other machine available sometime after the 26th of this month. So
yeah. I think the churches are looking for the 27th. Have you all had any requests from other kinds of operations that are not operating besides bars and?
Yeah, I got a call from the Bunny Ranch. They wanted to know what's going on.
You're talking about
our jurisdiction, John,
right? Jackrabbits and that kind of, yeah, right.
I thought the chairman is running around and talking to all these folks like NACO. He'd have some inside scoop.
I don't. No. But thanks for the query. I appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cates?
working through the Economic Vitality Program, I forwarded several reopening plans to the LEAP for different kind of fitness centers, gyms, pool. I gave them about 4 or 5 different policies for them to look at. Dagny was very appreciative of that and said they were currently looking at those types of businesses.
Did you talk to her today?
No, that was like yesterday or the day before.
Okay. Okay. So she got the information. Okay.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cates, I was reading that there was like 1,249, I don't know, not a foreclosure, a lien against properties that hadn't paid their property taxes in the county. Is this a typical number or?
I don't know. I don't have any information on that. I can look into it.
It was published in the paper, and it was about almost $1 million in back taxes.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it stands. I don't see Kathy's on there, so maybe she'll come up. There she is. Miss Lewis.
Hello.
Hello.
That is, sorry, that is typical. That is about the same amount that we had last year. So nothing has changed now, but the last installment was due the beginning of March before this really started. So we have not seen any effect from property tax calculations. Property tax collections.
Thank you. Good.
Good question. Okay. Any other comments, questions?
It's the Local Empowerment Advisory Panel.
Thank you.
I'm not going to give them.
Okay. We're going to leap up there. If there are no further questions, then I'll ask for a closing public comment. Ms. Wood?
Yes, sir. We have 4, so I will start playing them.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. This is Carol Chaplin with the Lake Tahoe Visitors Authority and the Tahoe Douglas Visitors Authority. I am calling today to support the county commissioners supporting the Hard Rock petition to reopen in a phased manner. We have found Hard Rock to be an excellent partner, and as we all know, we are so economically challenged. It would be very, very important for us to continue reopening our facilities and our businesses, and I can't think of a better partner than Hard Rock to show us how it is done appropriately. I hope that you support this initiative, and thank you.
Okay. Next.
Ellie Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R, comment period number 2. The upcoming budget meetings, May 26 and 27, must disclose future funding requirements for Moeller Parkway as committed in the build grant. As stated, section 3.3, non-federal funds. Douglas County has committed $4 million to the project, which will be funded by a 20-year bond sale with a maximum bond amount of $500K per year. At the very least, the placeholder must be accounted for, as we may not be awarded the grant. Again, the unapproved Fantasyland Agri-Hood 2,500 home Buckeye Village is mentioned in the grant in section 4.1.3, economic competitiveness. Table number 7 states undeveloped land adjacent to Moeller Parkway. Receiving area has 1,514 acres, agriculture 588 acres, industrial 399 acres, commercial 73 acres, for a total of 2,575 acres. Moeller Parkway will provide direct access to 5,000 to 6,100 of planned single-family homes and eliminate the need for residents to navigate through the US 395 corridor. The largest source of this housing will be the Buckeye Farm Conservation Community, which is 1,250 acre parcel adjacent to Moeller Parkway. Same section grant language. To understand Douglas County's position and need for funding through the FY 2020 bill grant, one must understand the recent economic boom that has taken place in northern Nevada. Tri-Center is the largest industrial park in the world. It is a 107,000 acre park that encompasses a developable 30,000 acre industrial complex. There is approximately 11 million square feet of industrial space currently in use by almost 130 companies. The largest companies are Tesla, Zulu Switch, Walmart Distribution Center, Zuhuli Inc., Nevada Energy, and PetSmart. These statements support possible grants requested by Reno, not Douglas County. Another grant statement. Further residential development within northern Nevada communities is imperative to support the growing workforce at TRI Center. This statement pushes and supports the Douglas County agenda for more housing, but not for those that work in Douglas County and purport they cannot find affordable homes. The grant does suggest we may be able to draw national chains to Douglas County as we have 399 undeveloped industrial zone acres near Moeller Parkway. I oppose the bill grant submittal.
Okay, next.
Virginia Starrett, VIRGINIA STARRETT. I am against the agenda item number, I think it was 2. County Manager Patrick Cates made the unbelievable statement about the county submittal for a bill grant that the Board of County Commissioners doesn't need to read the grant application, that staff prepares it, and so it doesn't need to be understood by the commissioners until the grant is obtained. Then, he states, the board will have an opportunity to turn down the grant. What kind of cockamamie governance is that? Staff could bury in the grant application that the county is going to spend millions and millions of dollars on a project that the county doesn't have a chance of having. We could win the grant and then have spent all this time and money on a grant application that was doomed from the get-go. I'm ashamed of the CYA explanations given by Kate, District Attorney Ritchie, and others that are in essence saying the board has no control over what goes into the grant application, so just shut up and let staff do its thing. That argument gives the Park 2500 supporters carte blanche to make any and all kinds of fantasy projections as to how the proposed road will become a reality. I don't think I have seen a more egregious approach to transparency in my time in participating in county board meetings. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Jim Slade, SLADE. I always expect more in the way of attention to detail from both presenters and staff, and it's disappointing when it's lacking. For the Hard Rock Cafe, in their written presentation to the board and the public, to say that the closing of the casinos happened May 17th, when they really meant March 17th, is pathetic. Don't they do any proofreading? Yes, I do expect more from a multi-million-dollar business. And with the added funds for Muller Parkway, I mean, I don't quite understand the problem, but it seems like a poor job by the county manager to get approval for $3.6 million on May 7th and submit a bid on May 18th that may eventually commit Douglas County to $4 million. And to do that before he comes to the board to ask an additional $400,000 indicates a lack of proper planning. And I agree with Commissioner Nelson that you shouldn't have 1,000 pages or more dumped on you the day before. You should have at least the opportunity to read that before you actually vote on it. So I'm glad that you put off that for another day. But with the event center and now with Muller Parkway, it certainly appears that some commissioners are trying to cram through aspects of controversial RDA 2 and Park Ranch development prior to the November elections, when hopefully our citizens will have the opportunity to weigh in on both issues. To commit $34 million for the event center, another $4 million for Muller Parkway at this time of financial peril seems to be fiscally irresponsible. And it shouldn't be done just to try to get these aspects of those two projects further along so that the public doesn't have the complete opportunity to weigh in on what's best for our county. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of public comment. The last one was received at 2:44 p.m.
Last one at 2:44.
Correct.
Okay, so we're well outside the 5-minute range. Any last comments from the commissioners? Okay, well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for marshaling us through this, Ms. Wood and Mr. Cates. Everybody have a good rest of your day. We are adjourned.
Good day all.